Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the ETVT podcast, where you're free to build your perception from an infinite world of possibilities. I'm your host, Elijah Vargas. Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the ETVT podcast, where we're all about perception. Today's episode is going to be on mistakes, and since it is the official episode of the week, we have our cup of tea. Very sweet. I have not had honey in weeks, and I forgot how good tea was with honey. Also, give me 1 second. Let me fix this. Shout out to the Great Smoky Mountains. There we go. Um, this is not a paid sponsorship or partnership, by the way, but I went there and it was only like $800 for a whole week back in 2018, 2019, before I deployed. And me and my girl since then have gone 5 or 6 times. Always loved it. Things are a little more expensive now, but if there's one thing that remain, the country almost came out. Oh, hold on 1 second. If there's one thing that remains, the Great Smoky Mountains has always been a wonderful family-oriented place. So, with that terrible intro, let's get right into it. I will be using references from originals, How Nonconformists Move the World. Oh, that light looks terrible. We will fix that. This is not an official book review anyway, but I want to talk about mistakes. Why am I talking about this today? In light of all the crazy things going on, I mean, we're 2 days after the presidential election, and I have been flabbergasted. I have because things that people are saying are just making no sense. And there's a lot of hypocrisy, a lot, because people have a lot of hate and anger and fear in their hearts. And what's happening is they are targeting people for that. They're not trying to find legitimate ways to solve issues that they're looking for. So, and I've had this conversation. A lot of these issues are human societal issues. I think they're giving the government itself far too much credit, especially because a lot of these people never sat down and took any time to study the basic fundamentals of how our legislative system works. Just the legislative section of our government alone. So people are very hateful. People are very spiteful. And I'm not gonna lie, I'd be a hypocrite if I said I didn't do the same thing, because I have been on my personal accounts, I have seen people that I've known for years and would have never expected insult and bash and even threaten each other. So when I see one of those people that I've known and I call it out, I'm always up for debate. But don't use things that are not proven, things that are not facts, or even your own personal thoughts and opinions as a means of targeting anybody. Especially when it comes down to things like calling people uh, homophobic and racist and misogynistic. And there's so many terms that people in this generation have just started throwing around like that's okay. And I don't appreciate that. I also don't like how somebody will claim that a particular group of people are racist and then call them N-word monkeys. And I'm just like, nobody's being racist but the person that's claiming everyone else is racist. So that's what I mean when I say a lot of hypocrisy is going on. Well, I had a personal experience where somebody that I've known for over 10 years now, who's one of my greatest friends, who, for the record, I do not hate, I do feel bad, in light of one of these debates, personally came to me and threatened to use my past against me. And what shocked me was I've spent these last few years, for anybody that I love, for anybody that was in my life or very close to me, I have opened up about so many things that I had that were secrets, that I did that were morally wrong. Am I the worst person in the world? No, by far from it. But I also know that there were things I did that I knew were not correct. So there's a lot of things I've never done. Like I've never smoked weed, I've never stolen from anybody. I've obviously never done drugs. Just because I've seen the repercussions of that. And despite me being around it so often when I was a kid, I still knew that there was nothing good to come out of it. So I personally will not get involved. Um, but there were things I've done that have hurt people, and I've confessed to it. And it took a lot, even to this day. And this is where mistakes come in. When you're suffering the consequences for your actions, right? Which I feel like I have initiated intentionally. You make the decision at that time of hardship when people rightfully leave you, when people rightfully, I wouldn't say rightfully bash you, but will say things like you're a liar, you're a terrible person, and you're what can you say? Um, Everybody has to admit at some point in their life that they're not perfect. And if you're hiding something from your wife, from your partner, from your mother, from your whatever, and it's not something that should be hidden, if you get what I'm saying, like it is a mistake, I don't think that's something that anybody should necessarily live with for the rest of their life. I think eventually, and the truth is, whether you believe in God, the universe, or whatever, karma is a very real thing. So as I got older, I started to recognize that. So what was shocking to me was I have not yet personally had someone else say, I got dirt on you and I'm going to use it against you. And I'm just like, there's nothing you can tell anybody close to me that they don't know. I've already taken care of that. And it was hard. I've gotten into alcoholism and the separation. And I was talking to my mom about it today, and there was a lot of things we've been through. But point is this, that's what's happening in the world right now. And that is my personal reason for making this podcast tonight. Because I look at mistakes in two different ways. There are professional mistakes and there are personal mistakes. I think that these two types of mistakes have different impacts in the person that you are and the life that you live. So first, let's go into professional. I want to start this one off with a story. Before I deployed, we had like tactical combat operation missions. We did this whole training and we did these simulations. You learn about rules of engagement. You learn about, certain formations, and you have like mission objectives with all the stuff that you learn, making reports and all sorts of wartime type stuff, right? And the non-commissioned officer that was in charge of this training said one of the most amazing speeches I heard from anyone in uniform. And he trained special forces, and he said, when I train the special forces, we try to make as many mistakes as possible, because when you're in the war zone, there is no second chances for your mistakes. We take pride in our mistakes because this is the time to make mistakes. If we practice perfectly every time and succeeded in everything that we did, we will not be prepared to fight. And long story short, obviously that stuck with me. I mean, that was, gosh, 2020, about 5 years ago. And I'll never forget, I recycled that speech. Um, After my deployment, so about 3 years after that, I was in charge of instructing a company for spot reports. So I'm a young E4, and I remember being told I was going to give the class, and I spent so much time training, trying to perfect it, because I will admit I never did it. So I kind of felt like an imposter. So I'm in charge of training these soldiers how to do this thing, a lot of them that I've never experienced in real life. So I recycled that speech, and I got so much advice from officers. I got my kudos, I got my corrections, and beautiful experience. But at the end of it, and I have all the guys in the gym, and I'm like, listen, I said the same thing that you said. I was like, now's the time to make mistakes. And so hype, it was awesome. And I was like, you guys should take pride in your mistakes. In a war zone, there are no second chances. And they loved it. So then a command sergeant major comes out, much older gentleman, and he grabs a mic and he's like, well, I wouldn't say take pride in your mistakes, but, and I was like, I mean, do you? So Hart Financials, who was somebody that I served with, he was there and he had reminded me of that this year, which I completely forgot about. And he's like, I was so pissed off when that happened. And I remember people came up to me after that and they was like, that was great. We appreciate you, blah, 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 blah. Uh, but that makes me think, like in the professional realm, right? You have people like that sergeant major who will preach the idea of perfection. Let's get into the main point, please. I think I've talked enough. The way people look at it when it comes down to mistakes in the professional world, right, is you either make as many mistakes as you can, especially when you're young, when you're starting off, when you're training, when you're whatever, when you're in a safe environment, because the more that you fail, the better you'll be equipped in the future. And then there were people who, and I think this is more common with people who have only done this for like one experience for their life. I think people who compact themselves to one profession for one company in one area, I think they'll suffer from this the most. And that's I am going to try to be as perfect and come out as perfect on paper as I possibly can at all times. And with the young, no, I'm sorry, with the older generation, that was a legitimate way of operating. Because if you think about it, a lot of things went off of a resume, which if you look at Dr. Jordan Peterson's university, I just listened to an interview with George Jenko and the CEO for Daily Wire. I can't believe I forgot his name. Anyway, it's gonna come to me, and I'm gonna be so embarrassed. But it's obvious that there are many mindset practices and stuff that we're realizing we cannot go into this new world obtaining. And one of them is the falsified idea of perfection, because a lot of those people who try to be as perfect and come off as perfect as they always could, uh, never fully develop themselves as a professional. And what I think the absolute 100% truth is that if you're going to be the most professional, the most successful leader in particular, not manager, leader, an actual leader, which I think is not something that is a position that's given, but it's something that a person is. You have to know and honestly be more comfortable with making mistakes. As a leader, especially a professional one, your job is to be able to teach your subordinates how to navigate, be able to lead by example and give them tools this to handle and navigate this extremely complex world. I see managers who think that it's their job to be perfect at every time. And when things go right, take all the credit. And when things go wrong, blame their subordinates. Um, and then I see leaders who actually do exemplify all four quadrants of leadership, which if you don't know what those are, look them up. Because the idea of perfection is very dangerous. And actually, the reason why I have this book is because there was a note I wanted to share, something that I highlighted here. And this particularly has to do about child prodigies. And it says, as child prodigies, it turns out, rarely go on to change the world. So I'm gonna skip a couple paragraphs. It just talks about psychologists studying history's most eminent influential people and blah blah blah. Although child prodigies are often rich in both talent and ambition, what holds them back from moving the world forward is that they don't learn to be original. As they perform in Carnegie Hall, win the Science Olympics, and become chess champions, something tragic happens. Practice makes perfect, but it doesn't make new. The gifted learn to play magnificent Mozart melodies and beautiful Beethoven symphonies, but never compose their own original scores. They focus their energy on consuming existing scientific knowledge, not producing new insights. They conform to the codified rules of established games, rather than inventing their own rules or their own games. All along the way, they strive to earn the approval of their parents and the admiration of their teachers. So, this is specifically talking about the dangers of perfection, the idea of perfection to originality, which is one of the biggest things that you have to develop as a leader, which is why I wanted to use this book, because that's the way I perceive that. So I think now would be a good time to make the transition from the professional to the personal realm, because this is starting to get a little more personal. Is not only are mistakes and failures important for you as a professional, but that's when it starts trickling into you as a person. The reason why I was able to learn how to confess to my mistakes is because I, by choice, put myself in a position where I knew I would never be the best. I was no college student. I was no straight A student, no honor roll, none of that. And as a matter of fact, I used to sit down in school and fear the idea of going to college, despite the fact that I knew that I was going to do whatever it took to get a degree. I used to have anxiety about thinking about having to sit down for an hour and take a test or read books, that I'm told to read, not by choice. I hated reading. I hated all of that. And anybody who's in my past knows and will tell you. So when I joined the military as an information technology specialist, I knew that I am most likely going to be the dumbest in the room at all times, which, by the way, did not turn out to be true. But that is the only way that you learn what you're made of, is by making your mistakes and just growing from them. It sounds corny, but it's the truth. The issue is this, is that personally, it's scary. Personally, an ego is one of the biggest killers of man. It hurts for people to not be heard. We are humans and we all naturally want to be heard. I feel like people who tell me the, oh, I don't want to be heard thing, I think that there's a lot of mistakes they haven't fessed up to and a lot of soul searching that they haven't done. Because I'll be the first one. People say, oh, you talk a lot. You're damn right I do. Damn right I do. I've been blessed with a mouth. I've been blessed with ears. And what I'm going to do is be the best leader that I can be, mistakes and all. So when you put yourself in a position where you basically know you're setting yourself up for mistakes, the worst thing that comes from that in a safe environment, I'm not talking about a war zone, is coming out a better person. But it is a lingering pain in a lot of circumstances. And that's what I have spent the last few years going through. So when somebody from my past comes and says, I'm going to dig up so much dirt about you, and I'm like, do you know what I've gone through to already dig up that dirt myself? I got nothing to hide. And what's crazy is you realize that people cannot weaponize that against you. But it's pretty much because you shot your own self in the foot and you bled and you had to look at the wound. And then you had to say, well, I deserve that. It's what I did. So there's humbleness, there's humility, there's honesty, there's courage, there's confidence, there's truth. There's so many things that you learn from mistakes, things that you do not get from being perfect because it doesn't work that way. It's kind of like how I like to look at it this way. It's a personal thought of mine. Let's take a sip of tea. This is getting intense. Mm, I meant to say cheers. Anyway, sometimes I sit down and I think, how ironic is it that it's the tasty foods that are unhealthy for you? The things that are the most addicting, the candy, the sweet, the heavy sodium, the processed stuff. It's delicious. Our bodies, our flesh is attracted to it. It feels so much more comfortable to be lazy and to sit down and to just play video games and to not learn. Like learning is uncomfortable. Learning, and that's why the IQ of our current Western culture is so bad, and why we sit here looking at each other like, what are you talking about? Like, stop talking about things you don't know anything about. Admit that you're an idiot and pick up a book. But I also get it. It's uncomfortable. You are admitting at every moment that you're taking information that you just don't know anything and you're looking for the answer. Nobody wants to live like that, but a lot of us do. Like, that's what it is. And it is crucial for the success as a person, as a professional. And I can tell that the older culture has lived off of trying to have the most perfect resume, that a lot of them don't know how to be leaders to the new generation. I see people in our generation that don't know how to be leaders of themselves. And when I'm having conversations with people, I don't care about how cool you were in the past or how cool you are now, what sports you used to play or whatever. I don't like it's boring to me to hear about all the perfect things that you've done, all the things that you know in terms of like average conversation, right? If I want to do business with somebody, I want to know that I'm doing business with somebody that has courage, that has the ability to learn from their mistakes. So my favorite thing is talking to entrepreneurs. And it's hard because there's a difference between talking to people who are actual entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, experienced entrepreneurs, and people who went to college for business or I don't know, just read on the internet or whatever. And what I've learned is in pretty much all of my experiences watching hell, even in the books I've read, like with Rich Dad Poor Dad and Dave Ramsey and I'm gonna start naming every book in my damn library, but it's like talking to the entrepreneurs. They have so much lessons to share from the mistakes that they've made. And to me, that's the part that normal, or I guess average professionals don't know how to talk about because these people who have never and most likely will never accomplish what these people have always want to say that they know. And it's like I said in a past episode, where I know how everything can go wrong with my business or my ideas or whatever. You don't have to tell me that. What I want to know is what kind of ideas do you have to possibly make it go right? And why do you have those ideas? Like, what did you learn from past mistakes to? That's what makes life so puzzling and complicated, which is why, as a leader, which is why not everybody can be a leader, there's, it's complicated. And with this just being the subject of mistakes, it is a simple word with a lot of power that can be perceived in a multitude of ways. And to be honest with you, I really think that those are the main points of this podcast. So I want to end it on a good note, and hopefully I didn't take so much time. But I'm gonna say a few things. The first thing being, you're not a bad person for making mistakes in the past. You're not a bad person for making mistakes now. The only thing that would make somebody a bad person is the actions that they have. If you are an angry, hateful person that just wants to ruin people's lives, you're a bad person. If you are a person an imperfect person, if you are an actual human being, which means you're imperfect, make your mistakes, learn from the mistakes, enjoy the freaking ride. I say this all the time. It's painful, it's beautiful, it's exciting, it's exhilarating, it is unfair, it's also fair. So complicated. But if you get one thing out of this podcast, hear that message today. I am proud of you for never giving up. Because when you do these things, when you fess up to your mistakes, when you go out there to make mistakes and admit that it's going to happen, and you're willing to do whatever you got to take to learn from them, I mean, what more can you ask for? So I am proud of you because it's never easy. If it was, everybody would do it. And as you know, not everybody can do it. The second thing, which I honestly kind of forgot because I spent so much on my first point, maybe I hit a few points in that point, but you should take great pride in yourself. Most of you, at all times. Because I can tell you there's going to be people who have listened to this episode and pretty much got nothing out of it. Oh, I'm perfect. Oh, you don't know what he's talking about. What can I say? Yeah, enjoy the ride. That's going to be the thing for this episode. Ah, I remember what my second or third point was going to be is recognizing that we're not made to be perfect. No matter what you believe in, and this I think is extremely true, even if you're an atheist, there is nothing in our life and our conscious understanding that points to us being perfect. The person who said that when we got older ended up getting into witchcraft. And we had a lot of conversations about tarots and astrology and universal things. And I learned a lot about it, whether it's true or not. I enjoy the concept. I'm not going to knock it. But even that, when it's not the Holy Bible or the Quran or things that are written by disciples and have passed down in writings for centuries, thousands of years, actually, hundreds of thousands of centuries, even then, we're not perfect. So we're actually going against our very nature, trying to pretend to be perfect. And that's what I mean when I say that this society is not reality. Because the reality is we're not supposed to have a perfect resume. The reality is we should take pride in the growth that we have obtained from our failures. But we have programmed and literally developed people who have grown so afraid of that they could never see it that way. And that is more dangerous to me than someone who's a complete F up, but gets better every time. There's a lot of people that can't understand that. And honestly, to me, that's the enslaved mind. That's how it happens. That's where it starts. So do not beat yourself up for your mistakes and for your imperfections. Do not be afraid to answer to the karma. Excuse me, when it comes, because it's inevitable. One thing I realized today was had I not made these last few years of my life so difficult with decisions that I've made to be a more honest and moral man, which I was fortunate in many ways. I still don't feel like I deserve many of the things that came to me. And I mean the good things. Very recently, with this recent experience, could my life had been ruined? That was a wake up call from God. Like, yo, just remember, stay on your P's and Q's because everything will come back around. And that's that. So yeah, take pride in yourself, keep going, and I'm proud of you. Enjoy the ride. All right, ladies and gentlemen, cheers. ETVT out.